All right, everyone. Today we have Coach Ken Knox from Wake Forest University. He is the Assistant Director of Sports Performance there. Wake Forest has been part of the Connect platform now for a year, really, since we advertised their 22-23 internship. But now we're moving forward into the single semester model. And Coach Knox is taking the reins, taking the baton of coach development from Coach Kelly. So we're excited to have him join us and talk a bit more about what he's anticipating with coach development there at Wake Forest. So as per usual, I'm just going to turn over the mic straight away to Coach here and ask him to introduce himself a bit more in depth, talk about his development and how he ended up at Wake Forest. So please go ahead.
Yeah, first, I just want to say thank you for having me. This is a great platform and I really enjoy having the opportunity to be on it. But like you said, my name is Ken Knox. I am the Assistant Director for Sports Performance at Wake Forest. I got here in February of 2021. And I did my undergrad at Emory and Henry College, a Division III school in Virginia. And I initially started as an athletic training with the athletic training background. And then it wasn't until my junior year, I'd been playing baseball, been playing football. So I had a pretty busy schedule. But then I decided, okay, it's time to start thinking more about a career. And that's when I started to explore a few more avenues in terms of, do I want to stick with athletic training? Do I want to go a different route? I knew I wanted to stay in athletics, but which route do I want to take? And then it was the summer of 2017. I actually did an internship at the University of South Carolina with their football team and briefly their women's soccer team. And that's where I met Coach Alex Buckman, who's still at USC. And he was super helpful, super knowledgeable guy. Still keep in touch with him today. And he actually helped me out and put me in touch with Coach Jeannie Rankin, who was at the University of Kentucky at the time. And moving forward to my senior year of undergrad, I didn't really know what I needed to do. I thought I needed to go to grad school instantly. I thought I needed to get a GA, but I reached out to Coach Rankin and essentially they didn't have any opportunities, but luckily enough, I reached back out to her later that year. And that was around the time where they start accepting applications for their volunteer internship in the summer. And I didn't really have any, I guess, tunnel in terms of where I wanted to go. So I was like, why not go to Lexington? Why not apply? Why not try to get this volunteer internship opportunity and see what happens after that? Because the way the system worked when I was going through it was they essentially gave us the opportunity. You'll be a volunteer intern for the summer, and that comes with the opportunity to be promoted to a paid intern, coaching assistant, or even the opportunity to possibly get your master's after that first year. And luckily enough, I was blessed to have the opportunity to go through it, get that opportunity for like the graduate assistant role, and lucky to be able to get my master's from there. And got to work with Coach Rankin. She ended up leaving about halfway or 2/3 of the way through, but that staff's been very influential in terms of just my development. Definitely a big reason why I'm at Wake Forest today. Coach D, Coach Spurlock, big influences on everything I do and how I hold myself. And they just prepared me for Wake Forest. And then February of 2021 came and it was time for me to finish my master's. So I knew wasn't a spot there, wasn't an opportunity that I necessarily saw opening. This one was one that was open. So I just applied and here we are 2 years later, almost.
Yeah. Awesome journey. That's cool. So when you were at Emory and Henry, was Mike Caro there at the time?
Yes, he was.
He was.
So it started with Coach Bullock and then Coach Bullock left. And then Coach Caro came in my senior year of college.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I have a connection with him through the University of Michigan doing internships there. And he was there at some point in time, but yeah, no, that's great. And then obviously football. So you kind of, obviously a bit of a mixture, right? You were athletic training, you thought of, then you were thinking, okay, what do I really want to do this? Going to strength conditioning. And then it was a bit of a dabble in football, strength conditioning, different beast altogether.
Exactly.
And then across to Kentucky. So that's good. I actually love it. I've spoken to a number of coaches recently who have started in their undergrad studying, whether it's clinical rehabilitation, health sciences, or athletic training per se, and then have transitioned out. Do you find that now as a strength conditioning coach that lens still has influence on your decision making as a strength conditioning coach? You're thinking, you do think about, sports medicine principles, rehabilitation sciences, and incorporate that into your performance training?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's honestly one of the first things that comes to mind when I think of programming and training. Honestly, I put at the priority list health and then performance. If they're not healthy, they can't perform. So I'm constantly thinking of my sports medicine background. And even if we do have the worst case scenario where they do get injured and they are now going through a return to play protocol, how can I get them back in the most efficient way? So I definitely think it's beneficial. And it's one of those things where I ended up becoming a certified athletic trainer. I didn't want to just waste the 4 years of college, but it's something that I can utilize with strength conditioning, but I don't have to go through the entire part and process of athletic training.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's perfect to have those tools in your toolbox that you can really lean on, because they are synonymous with one another. So it's great that you have that. And I think to have a young coach learn under somebody like you who has that transcendence between sports medicine and sports performance, that's awesome. Kentucky, great program, obviously part of the Connect platform as well, with Coach D and his video on there. If I could, do one of these things, and here's Kentucky's video linked up here, I'd do it, but I have no idea how to do that. But no, it's good. Yeah, they run a stellar program, and obviously you're a product of that. So that's great to hear your journey. So now, speaking about Wake Forest in particular, and young coaches who are looking to develop through there, which you guys do so well, what do the young coaches do on a kind of daily basis while they're with you? What does a typical day or a typical week look like for them in terms of their responsibilities?
Yeah, so with it being an unpaid internship, we're definitely going to be more flexible in terms of hours. And we understand that you have to be able to provide for yourself and you have to have a source of income. It's unfortunate we're not able to provide that income, but it is what it is. So the day will look essentially, first group starts at 7 a.m. roughly. We have groups roughly until 11 a.m., a pretty big gap from 11 until almost 2. And then we continue with groups from roughly 2 to 6:30. They're not expected to be there, but it comes back to, we want them to get the most out of it, but that's relative for sure. So whatever they feel they need out of it, that's what we want them to get out of it. So if it's, I know I need to get this experience with soccer because ultimately my goals would go to with soccer, then if they're here every single day working with soccer and that's how they're able to develop and get closer to their goals, then that's okay with us. If there's someone that they don't really need to work separately or have a second job and they want to be here all day, then we'll support that as well. We have kind of routes for both types of situations. We don't necessarily want to narrow it down to, you need to be here 40 hours a week, or you choose when you want to be here and just don't worry about letting us know. We give them the structure and we give them the guidance, but we also give them the freedom to make those decisions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that flexibility. I think you're absolutely right. It's it would be daunting to step into an internship not knowing something like that, whereby there is a conversation to be had about how many hours you're able to do or what support you need to be able to make sure that you can make this internship valuable, but within reach and within reason. So that's good. And then, so like on a daily basis, I presume they're involved with all of the teams in Olympic sports. Is it a subset of teams? Like, how does that look for them?
Yeah, so they'll get hands-on coaching experience with all of our Olympic sports. If able to, then they can also work with football, women's basketball, men's basketball, but that's definitely more of a get to know them, and that's a little more of shadowing as opposed to actually coaching and being on the floor. So it might just be you get to speak with the strength conditioning coaches that work with those sports, but the hands-on coaching experience will have weekly staff meetings to hopefully help with developing soft skills and learning how to communicate and understand a lot of the things that you don't get to see if you're only in the weight room. They'll have weekly educational meetings where they're going through CSCCA curriculum and going through that material. And hopefully that helps them prepare if they do have the goal of even sitting for the CSCS or the SCCC, then that helps prepare them best for that. And then they're also going to get a lot of exposure with our sports science technology. And I feel like that's just becoming more a part of strength conditioning and sports performance overall. So it's not a huge deal breaker if a program doesn't have it, but it definitely helps and hopefully incentivize and motivates people when looking at our program, because we're lucky enough to have a lot of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can see that from the page below in your technology segment. Kind of cover all bases in terms of player load management, GPS, force time characteristics with your force plates, and what have you. So yeah, it's great. It's great to really see that. You touched on it just there about coach development and your curriculum and preparing for the SCCC or the CSCS. Maybe speaking a bit more about that with a bit more detail potentially. How do you typically develop coaches? Let's say, it's a week whereby there's time for you to sit down with coaches, whether that's a chalk talk or a hands-on session. Can you give us an idea of what kinds of topics you might be diving into and talking about?
Yeah, so typically it's definitely going to be a little different, I would say, this semester, where in the past we've had yearly long internships. In the first semester, it's been pretty much we're in the classroom, and we're learning more about the specifics of strength conditioning, whether it's the physiological adaptations, the return to play, the practical stuff, but in the classroom setting. And then the second semester is where we're more hands-on in terms of they're taking us through exercises. They're coaching us as student athletes. They're taking us through a lot more of those kinds of things. So the first semester would have been more of like a learning portion, and they can apply it whenever they want or see fit. And then the second semester is more of, all right, we've done what we need to in terms of education. Now let's go out and apply it. Let's be practical with it. Let's continue to educate ourselves by actually going through it and doing it and seeing how it feels. And that's something where we're going to work through in the fall. It's going to be more of a combination throughout the one semester, where it might be we're meeting at the beginning of the week to discuss, say, how to do a back squat or how to coach the back squat CSCCA protocol wise. And then we're actually going through that in the weight room later in the week. So it's just giving them that exposure more than once. And it's a consistent thing. So it might not be just we're doing it on a weekly basis, but we're doing that on a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis. And it's not just going to be, well, we touched on back squat, check, let's go off of it. It's going to be constantly compounding, where we start week 1 back squat, week 2 could be back squat and bench press. Week 3, it's going to be back squat, bench press, and then another thing. And it's just going to continue to develop in that manner. But we're also going to make sure that there's other things with sports performance besides weightlifting and just preparing for the CSCCA and CSCS. So if they really want to be strength conditioning coaches, then getting them, what I would argue, being a little more uncomfortable with the speed and agility and conditioning side of things, and taking them, teaching them through that, but then again, having them experience it and be exposed to it so they understand how it feels when the student athletes are going through it.
I love that model. I think it's so important to be engaged in learning. Us as internship coordinators, when we're developing curriculums and educational sessions, that's when I feel like the greatest retention occurs, right? When you have an actually engaged session rather than just sit in this classroom and watch the TV.
Absolutely.
Somebody talk at you. So that's ideal. And just like you said, being able to understand what that feels like. I think sometimes you'll find some people turning their nose up or scoffing a little bit at get the interns in week 1 and put them through a lift series that the players are going to experience. And maybe sometimes that might not be relevant for some of them, but I think a lot of the times it really does show them like, oh, wow, this is what it feels like to be a student athlete, because many strength conditioning coaches, at least the ones I've seen come through our facility, have not been prior student athletes, at least at the Division 2 or Division 1 level.
Yeah. And I think exposing them exactly like you're saying to what the student athletes are going to be experiencing, it helps them not only understand, but be able to relate to them a little more when it comes to that coaching experience.
Yeah, that's perfect. And a nice segue, I find, as we start to talk about coaches who have moved through Wake Forest's coach development and internship program and move on to other places. In particular with Coach Kendall Daniels, who I know has now made a triumphant return to Wake Forest, being such a relational character to you guys. And when I was speaking to Coach Kelly last year, to the student athletes who absolutely loved her there, and we're kind of sad to see her move on, but now she's back. So I wonder if you could at least start with Coach Kendall Daniels, and then maybe after that, speak to a few other coaches that have been through the program that have then moved on into full-time roles elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And just refreshing on what Coach Kelly said about her last year, it's one of those things where you have the experience, but you understand that sometimes it's important to maybe take one step back so then you can go 2 steps forward. And Kendall did come to us. She was definitely not green by any standpoint, but she did have areas that she needed to work on. And I thought throughout the year, she was able to work on those areas, which propelled her to being able to go at a part-time position at UNC, which that compounded and was able to propel her to a full-time position at Wingate University. And it's one of those things where you may have not been ready in the moment when you were with us then, but you left a lasting impact on us that we hope the other 2 universities that you're now at or we're firmly at are going to be able to prepare you for, so when you can come back to us. So you go somewhere you might not need the or have the experience, but leaving that impact can ultimately be bigger than, well, they've been at this university and now they've been at this university and this university. So to me, it's about she built the relationship while she was here with not only the staff, but the student athletes and vice versa. But then we knew based on her resume, based on her references, the people we spoke with, that she had worked on all of the areas and areas of improvements that we thought she needed to, which is ultimately why she was able to come back to Wake Forest this past December, but really this past year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the amount of times I've spoken with developing coaches here and said the phrase, the sooner that you act like a member of our staff, the sooner that's going to happen for you. So like step into the role of an assistant level strength and conditioning coach with us, not being I'm a volunteer intern, but like act as if you are part of our staff. 1, you'll get great respect from the student athletes around you. But 2, if you hold that mindset, you'll develop professionally much faster than any other intern coach.
Absolutely.
And so we'll be much more confident as a staff, seeing you in that lens and being able to refer you to full-time roles. So then to wrap things up here, in terms of coaches that might be interested in a coach development experience with Wake Forest, an internship with Wake Forest, what would excite you if you were to get an email land in your inbox? What are you looking for in the next generation of strength and conditioning professionals who are looking to develop through Wake Forest?
For me, honestly, I think it's just being genuine. I feel like there's so many ways you can show your personality, so many ways you can show how interested you are by just a simple email. And it's simple things, small things such as like a good morning or a good afternoon, or directly addressing, if you know who it's going to, directly addressing that, but also in your cover letter. Like I'm going to be able to see certain things through your resume. Show me your personality, show me why you're interested in Wake Forest, and show me that you're genuine about wanting to be a part of Wake Forest and be here, and not necessarily like you just mass emailed or you mass applied to a bunch of different places. I'm not saying you shouldn't put your application out there to a bunch of places, because ultimately you should want to go somewhere and you should want to prosper. And some places are better than others. Some places are more accepting than others, but you should have a genuine outlook and a genuine, when you reach out, it should be genuine in terms of who you're reaching out to, how you're reaching out to those individuals.
Mm-hmm. Love to hear that. Yeah, exactly. Do your research, have specific reasons why Wake Forest is the place that you want to develop at. There are clear reasons on this page, if I was a young coach, why Wake Forest would be a good option for me. So make that very clear in your cover letter and your material. Perfect.
I think,
well, Coach, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add. So I think after the email, I mean, it's one of those things where we want to see the resume, the cover letter, the references. We want to hear from the references. We want all of that to be good. But once they're here, it's one of those things where first and foremost, we want people of high character and integrity. And those are our core values. We want to make sure that we're representing the university in the way it should be represented. And then we want someone to come with a willingness to work. So understanding it's not the most fun being unpaid and doing work for free, but make the experience the most of what you can and don't make it seem like you're miserable. And then if I could give any advice to younger strength conditioning coaches, it's be patient and be willing to learn and be coachable. And with that, don't be afraid to make mistakes because you fear it's going to mess up your chance of being successful or mess up your chance of getting this position. At the stage that they're at, being vulnerable is going to be super important, and it's going to honestly give you more confidence in the long run. And it comes back to almost take one step back just to go two steps forward. I'd rather live a life of oh wells than what ifs. And that's how we want our interns to operate as well. It should never be, well, I didn't know what I should say, or I didn't know that I should do this. It's, well, you said this, but this is what could be better. So let's learn from that. You did this, but this is how we can improve. If you don't try it, then we'll never know how you can necessarily improve.
Love it. I don't have anything else I want to say because that's a perfect thing to end on. We should do a segment with advice from Coach Ken Knox.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect. Well, obviously, if anyone's interested in a coach development experience at Wake Forest, all the details are on the page below this, including dates, durations, deadlines, etc. So please get in touch with Coach Knox here and get your applications in early. But Coach Knox, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it. And hopefully this page will bring a slew of young coaches your way who are interested in developing in this field. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you for doing this. This is awesome again.